Alright, so Duelist Nexus is dropping in about 2 weeks' time, so we need to start talking about it. And for the first video on the topic, today I decided to talk about budget decks post Duelist Nexus. There's a couple themes, I should say, that are getting support from that set, and a couple decks that are still good right now and are going to be budget post Duelist Nexus as well. So we're going to talk about all of them, and you can share your thoughts as well if any of these decks interest you and you're maybe going to be picking them up. So if you like the video, of course, make sure to like it and share your thoughts in the comments, like I said. So getting started with the first one, I actually wanted to throw an honorable mention out there, and I wanted to talk about Exosister just for a tiny bit. Why only an honorable mention? I don't personally think the deck is that great. I never thought that, but it did have some recent success, mainly as the World Playoffs, NAWCQ, and also the Remote Duel YCS. And why I think that it was as great as it was at these two particular events was because the player was good with the deck, and also because it was a good meta call for the event in particular. So that's why it's only an honorable mention. I still think it's not bad. It has very decent effects because most of them banish, which is a very cool form of removal, and it also has a ton of space to play non-engine, as well as Shifter, which is also non-engine, but it's like a busted on non-engine. So yeah, I wanted to mention Exosister because of those factors. But the ones we're going to be talking about today, most of them have to do with Duelist Nexus, so they are better for the purpose of this video. But Exosister isn't bad because it's also not getting hit anytime soon, and it is cheap. So if you want to invest into it and just have a very fun deck that you can take to locals or regionals that is capable of performing well, Exosister would probably be for you. So also if you like XYZ monsters. So there's that as well. But as for the actual decks we're going to be mentioning, the first one is going to be Unchained. And I dislike Unchained so much. It literally makes me sick just talking about it. But I do have to mention it because it is budget and because it is receiving support. So the support that it's getting, I think there is one ultra rare, but I don't think it's going to be very expensive. And that is the only expensive card in the deck as far as I know. The core is cheap, the extra deck stuff is cheap. So if you want to play Unchained, or maybe if you wanted to play Unchained before and it wasn't that great, it is most definitely going to be better post-Duelist Nexus. The deck is quite explosive now. It's able to do, or will be, it's able to do a lot of things, and it just, it's nice to see old themes getting support and making them more viable, even though I don't personally like it. Most definitely I wanted to include it here. Then if you like the playstyle, all of the destruction stuff, the triggers, and the explosiveness of the deck, and the interactions that it has with the opponent's monsters where you get to link with them and all of that, it is quite fun. I am biased, I don't like it, but it's not a bad choice if you do. So that's the first deck I wanted to mention, and the next one is going to be Infernoble. So when it comes to Infernoble, I do not think the support is going to push the deck exactly to this whole new level, but I still wanted to mention it because it is going to be much, much better than the spot that it has right now in the meta, which is pretty much no spot, if that makes sense. So also another thing, the support cards are ultra rares, and if I'm not mistaken, they are 3 ultras. But again, you won't spend too much money, and the entire core is very cheap. So the only money you are spending is on the new product. And if you wait just a tiny bit, when Duelist Nexus drops, the prices go down a bit, and then you can pick them up and you have the core already, then you're good. You won't be spending too much money. And it is a combo deck. So if you're down to play that type of deck, also if you like warrior stuff, Isolde Turbo, anything along those lines, I think you are going to be enjoying this deck. And the support is going to make it better, 100%. Like I said, it's not going to be the top meta contender, but it's still going to be up there somewhere, at least on local or regional levels. So yeah, if you're into these types of decks, most definitely this is the wave of support for you, so you can just get the core for very cheap. And overall, if you look at warrior stuff, warrior extenders, and extra deck monsters, all of them are quite cheap, and you might already have a lot of them on hand, especially if you maybe played any kind of version of warriors, whether that be Goki, Rongo stuff, anything that has Isolde, you can play it right now. So yeah, I think this is another deck I wanted to mention, particularly because the playstyle is very much combo oriented, and it's very much different from some of the other decks that are going to be featured today. Because the next one, for example, is a control deck, and I wanted to talk about Rescue Ace. Now, disclaimer, I know that there is a rescue ace monster, I think it's the hydrant one, that is like 30 euros or something. And you do need to take into account that, at least to me and to many people, what budget really is about 100 euros or dollars to 150 or something like that for the entire deck. If you just get the core, I think you should be good, and then you can like add on top of it. And if you count together the 3 copies of the $30 card and then like, or euro card, and then like a couple copies of the 8 to 9 euro card, then you're still spending about 100 euros for the entire deck, because the rest is cheap and because the support is only commons. So I did want to include Rescue Ace, even though it might seem like, whoa, you know, one card is like 30 euros, how is that budget? At least in my opinion, it still is. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there. And also because if you look at the OCG, it had a lot of success, and many people say that it is going to be one of the top contenders moving forward. And since the core is, like I said, fairly cheap, you might want to pick it up. And then if it sees a lot of success at tournaments, those ultra rares at $30 or euros might go even higher, which is not ideal. So you want to pick them up now, at least in my opinion. So there's a control deck for you if that's the playstyle that suits you. And as for another sort of like mid-range deck that's not exactly combo heavy, I also wanted to cover Gold Pride Punk today. So with all of the reprints, which the Punk cards desperately needed, the deck is now very cheap to acquire. If you look at the Gold Pride cards, they are a couple euros, like all of them, but you're not spending more than 100 euros for the entire deck, at least the way I viewed the prices. I don't think you should be. So if you maybe have the cores already, that's great. If not, just get the reprints from the Monster's Revenge. I think there are quite accessible reprints there. Quite accessible is like 2 euros or something. So you're not spending a lot. And the deck isn't bad. It recently just got top 32 at the NAWCQ. And it's always this tier 2 contender that is able to sneak in wins. The only card that you will have to spend a bit more money on is Psychic and Punisher. But again, it's not horrible to just wait a tiny bit and then get it if you want, because for the most part, you are playing with your in-engine cards from the extra deck. So yeah, you know, Gold Pride and Punk is accessible. So if you mash them up together and create a deck, I think you should be good. And yeah, the next deck, or the last deck, I should say, is going to be Flunder. I wanted to mention it because it is seeing a lot of success. And also, side note, I did want to put Rika on this list, but from what I've been seeing, almost every single deck is playing Therian King Regulus as well. And right now, we haven't had a Therian King Regulus reprint yet because it's probably getting one in the tins. So I just excluded Rika from this list in particular, but it is very cheap. So if you want to get the Rika core, there's another deck for you that most definitely is going to like give you the money's worth, because I don't think it's getting hit. And even if it gets hit in the fall, you still won't spend too much money on the core itself. So you're not negging either way. So that's another one. But I did want to talk about Flunder because it saw a lot of success recently. And it's just always in such a good spot, I think, you know, with Shifter, non-engine, and just overall Empen and the trap card and the Harpy's trap card and everything that Flunder is able to do. It is a nice deck if you want to pick up that kind of like just stun / control type of deck. If that suits you, you know, it's not up to me to tell you that you shouldn't play it, even though I don't personally like it a lot, but still I wanted to talk about it. And it may be also quite a good choice if you're only getting into the game, because it's a bit more basic, but it still rewards good gameplay. Although, and that's also like on a side note, I don't always encourage you to get a very basic deck when you start, because I think it teaches you more to start with a more complicated deck. But to each their own. You can do whatever you want. I just wanted to throw a couple ideas out there, and Flunder would most definitely be one of them because the core is very cheap. Now, there is the quick play spell card. I always mention it, and it has to be getting a reprint sometime soon, probably in the tins, like almost 100,000% in the tins. So the core is very cheap. I would maybe wait, and like you can get the card in the tins as well if you want. Or you can get it because it's also not that horrible to spend like 10 or 15 euros for a card. Unless you're like, oh, I definitely don't want to do that because it is going to be getting a reprint. It's up to you what kind of version of the card you want. If you're fine with the OG Ultra Rare, then you can just get it and you can play Flunder for this entire summer. But, you know, you can also wait for the fall. So yeah, that's actually going to be it for all of our 5 decks, with a couple honorable mentions as well. Of course, I have to give you a bit more info than just the 5 decks I promised to you. So yeah, if you learned something, if you got an idea about what you can run this summer and fall, I'm very glad. And please let me know, and also like the video if you enjoyed it. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.